Hi there, and welcome to Joe Roberts Music and Travel. This is my travel vlog on Manaus in Brazil, which I visited in October of 2024. What I'm going to do in this vlog is talk a little bit about Brazil and Manaus, a little bit about my experiences there, give you a sort of insight into the city of Manaus, and also an insight into Brazil as well. So, my first impressions upon arriving in Brazil were that it was an incredibly hot country. My plane landed in Sao Paulo and I noticed the heat straight away, but even more so when my plane arrived in Manaus. The plane journey between Sao Paulo and Manaus was around 4 or 5 hours, maybe slightly in between those, and it was one of the most beautiful flights which I have ever went on. And it was incredibly clear all of the way, and I got to see quite a bit of Brazil on that plane journey, looking down at the scenery below. I got to see some of the Amazon, and there were even what appeared to be volcanoes, but they were actually large plumes of smoke rising from deforestation, which is quite sad to know. Upon arriving at Manaus and coming out of the airport, I very quickly got a taxi which took me to my hotel in the very centre of Manaus. And the first thing which hit me as soon as I got out of the taxi was the absolutely indescribable heat. And I would say that for probably the entire holiday, the temperature was up at around 38 degrees. It was anywhere between sort of 34 and 38 for a large percentage of the holiday, and certainly I never experienced a temperature in Manaus below 30. So the heat is quite an issue. If you have issues with very intense heat, it's probably not the place for you because it's a tropical heat and it's pretty much unrelenting. It's also like that at night. The hotel that I was staying in was on quite a busy street, and the street was literally just a 30-second walk from the Amazonas Theatre, and it is famous in Brazil as, well, as the name suggests, it's a theatre that's associated with the Amazon because Manaus is a city in the Amazon. The Amazonas Theatre is Manaus's most famous landmark, and it's become quite an iconic landmark and quite an iconic building, particularly for its distinctive pink exterior and domed roof, which has the colours of the Brazilian flag on it. And it's a very beautiful piece of architecture, and if you ever go to Manaus, it will be probably quite difficult to avoid it, but you definitely wouldn't want to because it's incredibly beautiful. There is a lot of shops in Manaus. Bear in mind, I only explored the centre of Manaus, but there is quite a significant shopping district, only a very short walk from the Amazonas Theatre if you're in and around that area. Your money will go far. The cost of living in Brazil is incredibly cheap. There are quite a lot of people in Brazil that are either homeless or living in poverty. I did notice quite a lot of people that were lying outside sleeping. This was going on even at night, I think. There's also a lot of stray animals as well. Most of them looked in reasonably good condition to me. I saw very few. I did see a few that looked to be in a really bad way, which was quite, I would say, sad in a way, but there were a lot of them that seemed to be in pretty good condition and they looked happy enough. There were even three that in my local area near my hotel that seemed to constantly be in a group, which was quite funny. So they were obviously friends. As I said, Manaus has lots of beautiful architecture, although some of it has been left to fall into a state of disrepair, which is pretty sad. There's a lot of that there. You could tell that Manaus was once a very sort of grand city, but it hasn't really been maintained properly in some respects. Going along with that theme, there does seem to be, in some parts of the city, a sanitation problem as well. So I did see quite a few rats, and there were quite a few places where garbage was piling up in the street. They also have quite a high number of vultures as well, black vultures. They are the sort of seagulls of the Amazon. In Britain we have a problem with seagulls scrounging. In Manaus, and I'm assuming other parts of Brazil, they have a problem with black vultures. So these are not brave birds when it comes to humans. I approached a few of them and they just flew away, but other than that, they are very, very highly present in Manaus, and they tend to feed on a lot of the rubbish that's lying around. I'm not going to single Manaus out in this respect because that is a problem in most major cities. You'll find the same thing in New York City. It also didn't detract from how I felt about the place, because I loved Manaus. That's a point that I want to make here. Even though it had its flaws, I still loved it. I went on an excursion there, and I went into the Amazon a few times, and I saw lots of things. I saw macaws. There were some guys as I went into the Amazon with the group that I was with, and they had a bunch of animals with them, and for a small fee you could have your photo taken with these animals, which I did for a few of them. They did have a really large snake, which would either be a boa or an anaconda, and I didn't get my photo taken with that, and I didn't get my photo taken with the caiman. They had a very small caiman as well, which I also didn't get my photo taken with, but I did have my photo taken with a sloth, a very small monkey, and a parrot. I'm not sure how well they treat the animals. I'm hoping well. The animals seemed healthy, they were a healthy weight, and they seemed lively enough, so I'm hoping that they look after them properly, but I'll never really know for certain. I love animals, so the second I saw them I kind of stopped in my tracks, and before I knew it they had placed the sloth and the monkey in my arms, so I wasn't really getting a great deal of choice in the matter. So I had my photo taken with these animals, and I gave them a small fee afterwards. Then myself and the other people who I was on the excursion with got taken to meet a tribe of the Amazon, and this part of the day was really interesting and really vibrant and alive, and they did a dance for us, and it was amazing. They did a tribal dance, and lots of photos were taken, and we got to see a little bit of the Amazon. We also got provided with lunch on that day. We went through a tour operator in the centre of Manaus, and that day was particularly excellent. We got provided with lunch. There was lots of other stuff. The other thing which I did on that excursion was go swimming in the Amazon with pink dolphins. There are particular spots where you can go on a trip with a guide and you can actually go into the Amazon River or the Rio Negro River and swim with dolphins. I'm using the term loosely because what actually happened was you go into the river and there is a guy there who basically feeds the dolphin fish, and he gets the dolphin to sort of jump out of the water. This aspect of the trip, I did feel a tiny bit disappointed at not being able to interact with the dolphin. I thought I might be able to touch its head and sort of be a bit closer to it, but what happened was the group of us, we had to sort of float in a circle around it, and we didn't get too close. So it's not really interaction in the sense that a lot of people would want, but having said that, in terms of experience, I was in the Amazon River close to a pink dolphin, which I guess a lot of people would not really be able to say they've done, so in that sense it was a memorable experience. The second excursion that I went on when I was staying in Manaus was to the Anavilanas archipelago, which is a group of islands just a short distance or a short boat ride from Manaus. I say short, it's like an hour or two, but it's within the Manaus area. So the Anavilanas archipelago is the largest archipelago in the world, or one of the largest, I can't remember which, but it's an incredibly beautiful place. So if you ever visit this area of Brazil, or you ever visit Manaus, it's definitely worth visiting this archipelago. There's some beautiful islands there. I went on a couple of them, and one of them there was like literally nothing on it, but we got to see it anyway. It was incredibly hot that day. As I said, temperatures in Manaus are very high. It was up at about 38 that day. We also went to another island where we actually went into some of the jungle, and we had a sort of maybe 90-minute trek through the jungle. It was a small group of us. There was about half a dozen of us, and we went with a guide and we explored and got to see some of the plants of the Amazon. We got told about some of the natural remedies that were there. It was quite interesting. It was incredibly hot given that we were in a rainforest, so that's something you have to bear in mind if you go to this place. You need to dress appropriately. The island also had a family on it. The tour operator that I went through arranged for a family that lived on this very small island to provide us with lunch, which they did. It was an amazing lunch, and the tour operator that I went through was incredible, and they provided us with plenty to eat and drink. It was excellent value for money, and the boat trip to the Anavilanas archipelago and back was fantastic, and I thoroughly enjoyed that day, and it will stay in my memory forever. The third excursion that I went on whilst in Manaus was to the town of Presidente Figueiredo, and I also visited some waterfalls near there and a lake as well, which I think was an artificial lake. The waterfalls were near Presidente Figueiredo, and they were beautiful waterfalls. You could get your photo taken in front of them, which I did. This was also in the jungle as well. There is about a 15-20 minute walk to get down to the waterfalls once you park up near the place. And the walk is not particularly taxing, but you will be walking in incredibly high temperatures. So again, you need to be aware of this. The waterfalls were incredibly beautiful, definitely worth visiting. And we also visited a lake on the way back, which was also in the Presidente Figueiredo area, and it was also worth visiting there as well. Some other trips that I went on whilst I was in Manaus were trips to Mindu Municipal Park, which was definitely worth visiting, and I wandered through that place. It's not enormous, but it's definitely worth visiting. It takes maybe an hour, maybe slightly more to walk around all of it. You might get to see some wildlife whilst you're there. Mostly what I saw was bird and insect species, but I believe they do have monkeys there. They just live in the trees. And it's a beautiful place. Again, extremely high temperatures, dress appropriately. It's definitely worth visiting. It's especially worth visiting if you want a taste of the Amazon rainforest, but without going into the actual proper rainforest and without paying for an excursion. It gives you a sort of small taster of it. The same can also be said of the Adolfo Duque Nature Reserve in Manaus. So it's a fairly large nature reserve. It might take you between an hour and 2 hours to walk around it. They also have a fairly decent selection of wildlife. They don't have anything too extreme in there. I doubt you'll find like jaguars or anything like that, but you might be able to see some exotic bird species, and you'll definitely see some exotic insect and butterfly species. I certainly did. I took plenty of photos. Whilst on that subject, if you are a nature lover, there's plenty to see in Manaus and the surrounding area. I saw over a dozen different species of birds. If you want to see more species of birds than that, you probably would have to spend a lot more time in the Amazon rainforest, and you'd probably have to go a little bit deeper into it. But I am a bird watcher myself, so I did see quite a few species of birds, enough anyway to sort of satisfy me, and there were some pretty beautiful species of bird. One of my favourites that is kind of known in the Manaus area is a bird called the kiskadee. It's a yellow bird, and it's known as the kiskadee because its call sounds like it's saying kiskadee. It's a beautiful bird, and it's a lovely little thing, and it's really quirky with its little unusual call. So there's lots of wildlife if you're into that kind of thing to see in the Manaus area, so it's definitely worth going to see for that. If you want to see a wider array of wildlife and and more sort of dangerous stuff, you'd probably have to go a bit deeper into the Amazon than I did. Things I would say about Manaus that were particularly distinctive were it did have a lot of art on the side of buildings, which is kind of a thing nowadays, but Manaus had a lot of it, and it was pretty impressive, a lot of it, so that's definitely worth seeing. If you just walk about sort of downtown Manaus, you'll see quite a bit of it. As I said, there's also quite a lot of nice architecture. As I've said before, some of it's in better condition than others, but it's definitely worth having a sort of wander around central Manaus and seeing quite a lot of the buildings, because some of them are quite distinctive. Other things that I would say, there's a particular area which I was warned of going to visit, but being the kind of person I am, I decided I wanted to see it anyway. It's down by the harbour, and there is an area right down at the harbour where they have a market, and I was warned off going there. I was told that it was not dangerous, but certainly shady, I suppose you could say. But I decided one afternoon to go and take a walk through it. It was absolutely fine. However, I would say that it's sort of the side of Manaus which maybe people don't talk about in their travel vlogs, or that the travel brochures wouldn't want you to see. So there was a lot of rubbish, there was really extreme sanitation problems in that area, and I did see rats wandering around in full view. So when I go to a place, my main preoccupation is having an experience of something different, and to me, as long as it's different to what I'm used to, I don't really mind too much what it is. I don't label all of what I've just mentioned as bad and negative. To me, it was just interesting because it was something different to what I'm used to. So when I was walking through that area, I wasn't walking through it thinking this is terrible, I don't like this place anymore. I loved Manaus and I would actually go back, and that's in spite of all of the so-called negatives that I've just mentioned. Yeah, I mean, rats running around in full view would put a lot of people off, but I would actually go back to Manaus. It had a certain charm about it despite all of its problems, and if I ever get a chance in the future, despite the fact that it was 3 flights and it was the better part of 24 hours travelling, I probably would go back, in spite of its problems. So having said all of that, what are my overall conclusions about Manaus? Well, I think that Manaus is a fantastic place and I would highly recommend it to anybody. I would especially recommend it to people who love nature because it's a very short distance from the Amazon rainforest, and in fact you can have a small taster of the Amazon rainforest just staying in Manaus itself. But shortly outside of it you have the Anavilanas archipelago, which is incredibly beautiful, and near to that you also have various different entry points to the Amazon rainforest itself. So if you love nature, definitely visit Manaus. If you're just going for a sort of sightseeing holiday or a relaxation holiday, it's less appropriate for that. However, there is plenty to see and do in Manaus, and if you can tolerate the heat, then it's definitely an interesting place that is worth visiting, and your money will definitely go very far there. So that is my travel vlog on Manaus in Brazil. I hope this has been useful and interesting and informative to you. Bye for now, and thanks for listening.